Every protagonist of the Fallout series has one common piece of equipment that distinguishes them apart from nearly every Wastelander encountered in the Fallout series. But Pip-Boys are not limited to just one model. There are plenty, and with each model's functionality allowed for users to achieve so much more. This is why today, we're bringing you the Every Fallout Pip Boy explained in X minutes. Overview. In a deal with Robco, the senior junior vice president of Vault Tech, Bud Askins, secured that Pip-Boys would be a piece of standard equipment for all Vault Tech vaults. The personal information processor, known by most people as the Pip-Boy, and its technology, gives its users the upper hand that allows them to achieve their goals and survive against brutal odds that no one else can achieve. Under this deal, every Vault Tech member of management would receive one as well. Their vaults would be packed full of them, allowing for every survivor of the Great War that had secured themselves a spot in the vaults to have a Pip-Boy to make their day-to-day tasks easier. And before you go, okay cool, it's a wrist computer, here's the scary part. Pip-Boys are not delicate. They're not a phone that dies in 4 hours because you looked at one video and forgot to put it to sleep mode. The lore straight up describes them as running on an internal fission battery and being hardy enough to survive basically anything, which is why some of them get passed around like heirlooms. So the Pip-Boy isn't just something you use, it's something that outlives you, which is extremely comforting until you remember what kind of company Vault Tech was and how much they loved documenting people. Pip-Boy Model 1.0. The Pip-Boy 1.0 was the earliest known functioning model of the electronic personal information processor and came about in the middle of the 21st century, decades before the Great War. Being the prototype and the first ever iteration of the Pip-Boy, it was also Robco's learning phase, where they would test what their technology was capable of producing and refine what worked. This Pip-Boy was met with many flaws that would be addressed in later models. The Pip-Boy 1.0 was bulky and cumbersome, with a small display screen that sported a 16-button keyboard, a toggle switch, multiple indicator lights, and a dial that allowed users to switch between settings. In its infancy, its metallic frame did not help its users as it just added to the weight of the forearm-mounted computer. Outside of its frame, the internals were largely exposed, leaving its hardware vulnerable to everyday use. To add to this, its cords were also strung about, which put its wiring at risk of entanglement as well. It's unclear if these Pip-Boys ever went into mass production, as the only one of these found in the series was discovered within a warehouse at Area 51 by the Brotherhood of Steel's Knights of San Fernando chapter in 2296. Its inclusion in Area 51, alongside technology of extraterrestrial origins, brings into question whether or not the original Pip-Boys had been a human design based on alien technology, perhaps even the tech used in Zatan spacesuits. What we do know is that the next model of Pip-Boy would excel at virtually every area that the Pip-Boy Model 1.0 had failed. Pip-Boy Model 2000. The Pip-Boy 2000 would cement itself as a vital tool organizing the day-to-day life of those fortunate enough to purchase one. Its simple wrist-mounted design allowed users to keep track of their activities, store important information such as data, travel logs, and various other useful tools. It even sported a fully functional global positioning system that assisted its users in getting to where they needed to go in a route that made traveling much easier for the corporate leaders that would be amongst the first to adopt its use. Though it was considered small by pre-war standards, the Pip-Boy 2000 still retained some of the design flaws found in the Pip-Boy Model 1.0. It utilized more modern cathode ray tube monitors in green monochrome that provided a higher resolution display than the Pip-Boy 1.0, though it was still bulky and a little too cumbersome for many to fully adopt. It would be the Pip-Boy 2000 that initially gained the interest of Vault Tech and Bud Askins, with their contract with Robco leading to all Vault Tech staff and established certain vaults being supplied this model. This is the model used by the famous Vault 13 Dweller, known by many as simply the Vault Dweller, in his quest to retrieve a water chip for Vault 13 and later to defeat the Super Mutant Master during the events of the first Fallout game. The Vault Dweller's Pip-Boy would also provide vital aid to the grandson of the Vault Dweller and protagonist of Fallout 2, the Chosen One, many years later, when he ventured out into the wasteland in a mission to find a Garden of Eden creation kit that would restore life to his village, though his journey would pit him against the remnants of the pre-war American government, now known as the Enclave. Its global position system was so advanced that it automatically generated maps of its user's local area, allowing for safe traversal and backlogs that made venturing back into those areas so much safer. The Pip-Boy Model 2000 could also record audio and video, which was able to be shared with other Pip-Boys or transferred to computer systems. It made keeping track of its users' chores and job assignments far easier, even allowing for important important dates and events to be marked on its calendar. The Pip-Boy 2000 even had an alarm clock, which saved users from having to carry around a bulky corded alarm clock that would have had to be continuously reset after use. As an optional feature to the Pip-Boy 2000, the Pip-Boy could be upgraded with a Watts CU motion sensor, which would detect the movement of biological material over a distance using a tuned radar device, very similar to a real-world speed awareness monitor that detects vehicle traffic speeds and displays it on a screen. This upgrade would allow for the maps generated by the Pip-Boy 2000 to mark the location of all living things on the map as a red dot. This upgrade would have been fairly common, as it can be found all over the new California wasteland in 2016-1. When obtained, it provides a 20% bonus to the Outdoorsman skill buff, so obtaining it during the campaign of the first 2 Fallout games is that much more worth it. The Pip-Boy's holodisk reader could be used to read any holotape that the user desired. The Pip-Boy 2000 also has a special screen that contains the owner's Vault-Tec personnel record, which serves as a database for all the user's abilities, including attributes, derived statistics, skills, traits, and the Pip-Boy system will analyze and catalog sustained currently. This would have greatly aided pre-war corporations in knowing the full capabilities of their staff with a simple transfer of data. But inside the vaults, such data would have been vital in deciding who is fit for what career, possibly even working alongside the GOAT test to aid the dwellers in filling whatever role they would best be suited for. Its subroutines also allows the owner to keep track of their standings with local factions, perhaps used pre-war to access job performance. Now it provides the vital role in knowing just what faction could be relied on by the users, so they won't mistake friend for foe. Curiously enough, it keeps track of the number of creatures and characters that their users have slain. Perhaps this was intended for something else pre-war, maybe even military service. Now it's adapted to the much more gruesome role of kill counter. Having a Pip-Boy also provided access to other technologies as well, including Pip-Boy answer consoles that would be required to take certain standardized tests transmitted to the Pip-Boy through a localized system. The Pip-Boy's recording systems would automatically translate all conversational data into text, allowing for users to review conversations and analyze what they should say next. It even aided users during trades, providing a comprehensive trading menu. An upgrade for the Pip-Boy that would greatly aid the user would be a memory enhancer, which transmitted information in the form of an optic flash directly to the user's brain, including dictionaries, encyclopedias, languages, and medical data. With all their functionality, they're not the most durable, as their systems required a routine of constant maintenance, or their users would find their data corrupted, and the machine would lose all functionality. Rob Coe, thinking ahead, would issue all Pip-Boys 2000s with a 3-month warranty plan. All Vault dwellers would have to register for a Pip-Boy to prove that they would handle its technology. The process to qualify would require dwellers to participate in an orientation seminar given by none other than their Vault's overseer to explain the functions, users, personal information settings, and maintenance information. To prevent the Pip-Boy from sliding and chaffing on the user's wrist, they would be measured so that the machine could be adjusted to secure it comfortably. This Pip-Boy also holds one of the few instances of Robco's Pip-Boy corporate mascot, also known as Vault Boy 2000, not to be confused with everyone's favorite yellow-haired Vault suit-donning mascot Vault Boy, who is Vault-Tech's mascot. Robco's mascot has pointy ears, red hair, and wears a red and yellow jumpsuit. The 2000 was also seen in Fallout Tactics, and intended for use in J.E. Sawyer's unfinished Simple RPG. There, the basic model could be modified with expansion hardware. Advanced, jam-packed vacuum tubes called data tubes could be connected to expansion slots to improve the device's functionality. The number of slots depended on the model. The 2000 handheld would have 6, while the wrist-mounted model could only take 4, which in of itself was probably one of the first retcons that the Pip-Boy 2000 was handheld, despite being firmly established that the model was wrist-mounted. There was even a Brotherhood-made version out in the Midwest, utilized by the Midwestern Brotherhood of Steel. The Brotherhood are no stranger to collecting and creating technology, but the creation of the Pip-Boy 2000 Brotherhood Edition might be one of their most impressive feats, if not for the countless other things they've both collected, invented, and destroyed in their centuries-long cycle of expansion and decay across the United States. Imagine a Brotherhood Elder or Paladin with a Pip-Boy. They just might stand a chance against any one of the protagonists. Although it was not as advanced as later models, it's still sought after in the Wasteland for its functionality. Pip-Boy 2000 Mark VI. Let's start with the model that sets the tone for Fallout 76, and honestly, for how organized Vault-Tec wanted the early post-war world to feel. The Pip-Boy 2000 Mark VI is a pre-war Pip-Boy model manufactured by Robco, and it's explicitly described as a database for the wearer's personal information and inventory, and an updated version of the Pip-Boy 2000. That part alone is huge, because it tells you this isn't some jury-rigged wasteland device. This is corporate hardware, refined over iterations, meant to be strapped onto people before the bombs fell. Here's the part that makes the Mark VI feel like Vault-Tech's mission control device. The lore says that each Vault dweller leaving Vault 76 was issued a Mark VI to assist in their goal of rebuilding Appalachia 25 years after the Great War. That is such a loaded sentence, because issued is not you found it. Issued means we planned for you to have this. It's the difference between a scavenger's tool and a company's expectation. Vault-Tech basically handed you a wearable to do post-apocalypse project management, and the Mark VI is not subtle about what it prioritizes. It's capable of tracking the wearer's status, tracking active or completed quests, organizing inventory, and it even has an overlay mode. In Fallout 76 gameplay terms, sure, that's your quests and your UI, but in lore terms, it's Vault-Tech telling you your life is a checklist now. You are not simply surviving, you are completing objectives. And I know that sounds dramatic, but come on, this is Vault-Tech. If they could have put a performance review into the Pip-Boy, they would have. The Mark VI also includes a Geiger counter and a holotape player beneath the display, and that combination is the most Fallout thing imaginable. On one hand, it's your radiation warning, your literal "do not step there or your organs will become soup" alarm. On the other hand, it's entertainment and information storage, which means even at the end of the world, Robco and Vault-Tech were still like, yes, existential terror, but also please enjoy your audio content. It's like the apocalypse came with a built-in podcast app, except the ads are propaganda and the host is a pre-war executive telling you to die with dignity. Now hold on for a second, because you might think the Mark VI is just the Fallout 76 Pip-Boy. No, it's actually a clue about Vault 76 itself. Vault 76 is framed as a reclamation vault. The people who leave are supposed to rebuild, coordinate, and stabilize. So the Pip-Boy they're issued is basically a field operations computer. It keeps you organized, it keeps you mission-focused, and it keeps you quantifying your own condition constantly. That's not just convenience. That's behavior shaping. Because when your device constantly shows you bars and percentages and tracked objectives, you start thinking in bars and percentages and tracked objectives, and the menu structure reinforces that. The Mark VI has 4 primary sections on its main display: stats, item, data, and radio. That's a simple list, but it tells you exactly how Robco expects you to live. Your body, your possessions, your information, your signals. That's it. That's the whole world. Everything else is noise. So when you step out into Appalachia and see a ruined house or a corpse or a strange new threat, the Pip-Boy is quietly translating reality into categories that make sense to a computer, which is helpful until it isn't, because the Mark VI stats section is not just vibes. It's explicitly an overview of health and capabilities, showing things like HP, level, and limb status, with the Vault Boy animation changing depending on crippled limbs. And this is where the Pip-Boy becomes psychologically nasty. If you're hurt, the device doesn't just tell you you're hurt. It turns your pain into a cute animation. It turns injury into an icon, which is funny when you're playing. But in universe, that means a resident is conditioned to treat their body like an interface. You are literally looking at yourself the way a corporation would. The TM section does the same thing with everything you own, tracking carry weight, item value, ammo, armor, and more. Again, useful. Also, a little dystopian. Imagine living in the wasteland and your first instinct is not, do I need this, but what is the stack weight and cap value? That is not a natural human thought. That is a Pip-Boy thought. Robco put a store inside your arm. If the bombs never dropped, Robco would have absolutely added a 5th tab called subscriptions. You'd open it, and it would say, your hydration tracking trial has ended. Pay $9.99 a month or dehydrate manually. We even know from the Burning Springs update in 76 that the 2000 Mark VI had its own blinged out counterpart known as the Pip-Boy 2000 Mark VI. Make of that what you will. Anyway, now here's the big pivot. The Mark VI is an updated Pip-Boy 2000 line device, issued to Vault 76 dwellers for a structured mission of rebuilding not just Appalachia, but the whole of America, which is limited to Appalachia. That's one philosophy. But Fallout 4's Pip-Boy model is a different kind of terrifying, because it's tied to a cluster of vaults where the experiments were all different, but the infrastructure was shared. Pip-Boy 3000. The Pip-Boy 3000 is probably the one that most of you were introduced to in Fallout 3 and New Vegas. The couriers provided him the much-needed mapping data to journey forth in his mission to decide the fate of the Mojave Wasteland. His Pip-Boy 3000 even made it possible for him to travel to score a position in the Happy Trails Caravan Company and travel to the Zion National Park in Utah, not to mention earning the disdain of the Robco-hating Dr. O, or Zero in Big Mountain, or the equal dislikes from former Brotherhood Elder Elijah at the Sierra Madre. Plus, it came in handy with the challenges they faced traveling through the lonesome some road on their way to confront Ulysses. The lone wanderer of Vault 101 would be aided greatly by his Pip-Boy 3000 to track his father down, destroy the Enclave, and complete Project Purity, which would deliver pure drinkable water to the capital wasteland. The Pip-Boy 3000 Model A would be released shortly after the Pip-Boy 2000 Mark VI, improving upon its design in many ways. The Vault Tech deal enabled Robco to produce these on a much greater scale, able to stock the vaults that were lucky enough to be built after their release with a much greater number of Pip-Boys in their storage. As many of the vaults in the new California region had been built before its release, the Pip-Boy 3000 model would never reach those vaults and mostly be distributed to the residents' vault dwellers in both in the American Southwest and on the East Coast. Those vaults would have such an overabundance of these many that vaults would still be distributing mine-conditioned Pip-Boy 3000 models as far as 200 years after the Great War. It featured much of the same technology displayed in the Pip-Boy 2000 Mark VI, though the range of these technologies would prove to extend greater than the Pip-Boy 2000 Mark VI. This model sported an improved version of the Geiger counter, which was much more efficient and could detect radiation far more acutely than the Pip-Boy 2000 Mark VI. Its health technology systems were far more accurate, capable of quickly toggling stimpaks and RadAway. It could detect the status of limbs, number of stimpaks that the user has, and assist in guided applications of stimpaks so that they could be applied directly crippled areas or to the body as a whole, which utilized vital areas to heal wounds alongside other health issues, something that the Pip-Boy 2000 Mark VI could only choose one or the other. Like other models, it also utilized auto-mapping data and could detect biosignatures through those systems, though with the Pip-Boy 3000, it could map out a much greater range and access locational data that would help its users through a more comprehensive mapping system. The Pip-Boy 2000 Mark VI's mapping system had an overlapping issue, while the Pip-Boy 3000's mapping allowed for users to know just where they're walking without getting routes mixed up with one another. The Pip-Boy 3000 was a commercial success amongst the more wealthy Americans, as Robco provided consumers with the option to customize its exterior shell with gold and silver plating and encrusted diamonds. This would distinguish users from the common Pip-Boy Mark VI owner, as these materials would have inflated the cost beyond the means of even the most wealthy of Americans. This model would be labeled at the Pip-Boy 3 billion, and the courier has the option to obtain one if they assist Mick, who can be found at Mick and Ralph's store in Freeside, as part of an unmarked quest to figure out why the Omertas, who oversee the Gomorrah Casino, have suddenly stopped purchasing munitions from Mick. All the courier has to do to start this quest is talk to Mick and ask them about their business. Who will mention the Omertas and ask the courier to find out why and hand him a note to remind him to figure out Mick's situation. This questline will be blocked if the courier has already completed How Little We Know, the Omerta's faction quest. So be sure to wait until after to do that questline and side with the Omerta bosses, Nero, and Big Sal. Any other option, and Big Sal will not be around for the courier to convince him to continue doing business with Mick, which will take a speech check of 50. From there, all you will have to do is return to Mick and say, "Good news. The Omertas say they'll buy arms from you again." Mick will show his gratitude and reward the courier with the Pip-Boy 3 billion. The courier's Pip-Boy 3000 will be replaced by Pip-Boy 3 billion, but can be switched back to the original Pip-Boy 3000 at any time. All they'll have to do is talk to Mick, who will give the option. Pip-Boy 3000 Mark IV. The Mark IV is described as a pre-war personal information processor manufactured by Robco, again acting as a database for personal information and inventory, and it's an updated version of the Pip-Boy 3000. That sounds similar, but watch what changes when we get into distribution. The Mark IV was distributed to 6 Vault Tech vaults in the vicinity of Boston: Vault 75, Vault 81, Vault 95, Vault 111, Vault 88, and Vault 114. That is a localized rollout, a regional tech standard, which means Vault Tech was coordinating hardware across multiple vault projects in one metro area, likely because they wanted the same baseline of control and access, and the Mark IV's functions are spelled out with way more "this is a serious piece of equipment" detail. It has a built-in Geiger counter. It displays stats, maps, inventory, and item properties. Its screen acts as a flashlight in low visibility areas, and it has a dial for tuning radio frequencies. That last part matters. The Mark VI has a radio too, but in Fallout 4, the radio is not just entertainment. It's an intelligence channel. It's how you hear distress calls, propaganda, warnings, recruitment signals, and weird, creepy broadcasts that make you go, "I should not have tuned into this?" Keep that in mind, because this is where the Pip-Boy stops being helpful and starts being holy relic. The Mark IV is not only a survival interface. It's a system that's complex enough that the operating menu even lists a software stack, memory, and multitasking behavior. That means, in the universe, this thing is running like a real computer, not some magical handwave device. It boots. It has an operating system. It has constraints. And those constraints tell you what kind of machine it is. The Mark IV runs pip OSV 7.1.0.8 and uses a monochromatic vector display. And one of the listed details is that it has 64 kilobytes of onboard memory, with a specific amount free after initialization. Now, on the surface, that's nerd trivia. But in universe, it suggests the Pip Boy is designed like older clunky tech, but optimized to do a bunch of tasks at once, because the Mark IV's OS supports some form of multitasking. The lore explicitly notes that health notifications, munitions monitoring, quest tracking, and audio playback can run concurrently. That is huge. It means the Pip Boy is not just a static logbook. It's actively monitoring your condition and your environment while you do other things. And then it gets even more important for a Fallout 4-era protagonist. The Mark IV integrates with power armor computers, allowing access to the Pip-Boy from within the armor through a HUD, like on visor display. That's not just convenient. That means Robco and the broader pre-war tech ecosystem were designing interoperability. Your wearable computer plugs into your walking tank suit and keeps the same interface, which is exactly how a military contractor thinks. Seamless, standardized, efficient. And if you're a cynic, it also means you never stop being tracked, even when you climb into a sealed armored shell. Also, the Mark IV is described as being more ergonomically designed than earlier Pip-Boy 3000 models, with the note that earlier designs had inconvenient control placement and that this was fixed on the Mark IV. That sounds like a minor thing, but it implies a timeline of product feedback and refinement before the Great War. People used these. People complained. Robco improved them. The apocalypse didn't interrupt a single moment of version update culture. It just froze it mid-rollout. Now, here's the angle that I think makes the Mark IV feel different from the Mark VI. The Mark VI is a vault exit tool for a planned rebuilding mission. The Mark IV is a vault infrastructure tool distributed across multiple vaults in one region, including vaults with wildly different purposes. So the Mark IV isn't tailored for one mission. It's a universal key to living inside Vault Tech's ecosystem. It's the same baseline device whether you're in a vault meant for experimentation on children, a vault meant for social tests, a vault meant for cryogenic nonsense, or a vault that is literally built into a corporate theme park. The hardware stays consistent. The suffering changes. And the Mark IV has one other detail that's easy to miss if you only think of it as the Fallout 4 menu. The General Pip-Boy article notes that the Mark IV used a revamped display interface with animated images, could play games like Atomic Command and Red Menace, and unlike predecessors, could manually unlock main vault door entrances. That is insane in universe. That means some Pip-Boy models are not just personal devices. They are access devices. They are authorization tools. They are literally tied to vault security infrastructure. So when you see a Pip-Boy on someone's arm, you're not just seeing their journal. You might be seeing a key. That also goes for the Pip-Boys you see throughout Vault 81, and can even give random wastelanders in Vault 88. They're devices made to monitor, but can easily be removed if need be. And that's where the Pip-Boy becomes the quiet backbone of Vault Tech control. You don't need a guard at every door if the door recognizes the device. You don't need constant oversight if the device structures the user's life. You don't even need to convince people they're being managed, because the interface makes it feel normal. That's why the Pip-Boy is one of Fallout's best pieces of world building. It's a cute retro computer. It's also a corporate collar. Let's compare the Mark VI and the Mark IV in plain human terms. Both are pre-war Robco devices designed as databases for personal information and inventory. Both have Geiger counters. Both organize your life into tabs. But the Mark VI is framed around helping Vault 76 dwellers rebuild Appalachia, with explicit quest tracking as a core capability. The Mark IV is framed around being the standardized Boston Vault model, with detailed OS behavior, multitasking, and integration with power armor systems. One is a structured mission device. The other is a mature platform device that feels like it was meant to be the backbone of a whole Vault region's daily operations. Pip-Boy 3000 Mark V. Let's talk about the Pip-Boy 3000 Mark V, because this is the one tied to the Fallout TV series, and it's basically a walking proof that the Pip-Boy line didn't just exist as one static device. It evolved. The Mark V is described as a pre-war Pip-Boy device that appears in the Fallout TV series. Created by Robco and worn on the left forearm, predominantly used by Vault inhabitants to assist with Vault utilities. It receives distributed notifications and can allow access to living quarters. That sentence is doing so much heavy lifting because it quietly reframes the Pip-Boy from personal computer into part of the Vault's internal operating system. It's not just your device, it's your login. And the Mark V's distribution is one of the most interesting lore tells we've gotten in a while, because the lore calls out that this version was distributed to at least 4 known vaults in California California, Vault 4, Vault 31, Vault 32, and Vault 33. It was also used by certain Vault Tech employees in the pre-war era and scientists in the post-war enclave. So yeah, this isn't just a Vault resident toy. This is a device that moves between classes of people: regular dwellers, corporate employees, and the people who think the enclave is a good idea, which already tells you the hardware is doing something serious. Here's the thing, because I know what you're thinking. Okay, it's a newer model with some nice UI. So what? No, the Mark V is the most obviously modern Pip Boy in terms of how it behaves like a connected device. The interface shares its user interface with the Pip Boy 2000 Mark VI and the Pip Boy 3000 Mark IV, and it can play minigames like Atomic Command, meaning the software language is consistent across models. That's a platform. That's not a single gadget. It's like Robco built an operating environment and then kept shipping compatible hardware shells for it. Now look at the physical interaction. The Mark V is controlled by knobs on both sides, with one knob switching menus and the other navigating within them. That seems small until you realize what it implies in universe. This isn't a random bespoke one-off. It's designed to be operated quickly, almost like it expects you to be multitasking, moving, stressed, wearing gloves, maybe doing something dangerous. And then there's the drop of one of the most Fallout details imaginable. The Mark V has a built-in Geiger counter just like the Mark IV and Mark VI. So it's still a survival tool, but it also has a built-in microphone with a pickup range of a small room, and there's an explicit note of a security flaw where a third party can bug the device and eavesdrop on conversations near the wearer. That is not a fun extra feature. That is, your wrist computer can become a wiretap. If you ever wanted a single line that sums up the Fallout world, it's that. A device that claims to keep you safe also makes you vulnerable in a completely different way. Quick joke, because the only way to cope with microphone wrist surveillance is to laugh. Imagine being a Vault resident trying to gossip, and your friend goes, "Shh, don't say that out loud, my Pip Boy might be subscribed to the Vault's premium eavesdrop plan." Anyway, the Mark V's menus also show you how Vault Tech wanted the device to structure your life. It has 5 distinct menus: Stat, INV, Data, MAPI, and Radio. That's the classic Pip Boy brain layout. Your body, your stuff, your information, your location, your signals. But the Mark V adds this extra layer of Vault as a network. In the Stat menu, messages and alerts can show up as distributed notifications, displayed in large text, often with images related to the message. That means the Pip Boy is not just reading the world. The world, or at least the Vault system, is pushing information to you. This is basically a Vault-wide notification feed, like a pre-war corporate intranet, except your intranet is telling you about breaches and marriage approvals. And the Map menu is where the Mark V starts looking less like a journal, and more like a tracking and navigation device you'd give to field personnel. The Mark V stores navigational and geographic information, can calculate the shortest route to waypoints, and it updates the current position of tracked objects every second. It can also accept latitude and longitude coordinates as waypoints. And then it gets even more explicit. It has a built-in tracking module that can be removed and attached to an object. And then that object is marked on your navigation display with the selectable icon. That is the "where did my stuff go" feature. Sure, but in a Fallout context, it's also the "where did you go" feature if somebody slaps that module onto you, your bag, your weapon crate, or the person you're escorting. This is the point where I need to look you in the eyes and say it. The Mark V is arguably the most Vault Tech friendly Pip Boy we've discussed, because it's built to make Vault life and Vault control easier. Its notifications, navigation, object tracking, and audio, all tied into a device worn by everyone important. The Mark IV already functions as a Vault key with its adapter plug, opening Vault doors, and even interfacing with robots under certain conditions. The Mark V doubles down by emphasizing alerts, tracking, and connectivity. And yes, the Mark V also has an adapter plug feature similar to the Mark IV. The Mark V descriptions call out an adapter plug that can be plugged into ports around the Vault, commonly used to open and close interior Vault doors and the exterior gear-shaped blast doors. So the Mark V is also literally part of Vault infrastructure. It isn't just something you wear, it's part of what makes the Vault function. The Mark V was so advanced that Robert House, owner and founder of Robco, would use it as part of his ultimate contingency plan for if his physical body were to fail him. This contingency was thought a failure by House during the events of Fallout New Vegas, until everyone's favorite gunslinging ghoul, Cooper Howard, was able to deliver the diode into his cold fusion reactor at the culmination of Season 2 of the Fallout Amazon series. This contingency plan consisted of giving a special Mark V, capable of containing a fully uploaded copy of Robert House's mind within it, to a trusted advisor. Knowing that House had viewed Benny as a sort of protege, perhaps if he hadn't betrayed this, would have ended up in the hands of Benny. Instead, it would be given to Cooper Howard, though this would prove a fatal miscalculation, as it had a fairly short range, and when the ghoul abandoned the Mark V Pip Boy deep underground, House would be unable to reconnect to his main systems and seize command over whatever remained of his systems. Next up, the developers of Van Buren reimagined the Pip Boy, thinking about what it could have become if the series took different turns. And it brings us what Robco's product line might have looked like if the Great War and Interplay's bankruptcy hadn't hit the brakes on everything. Lil Pip 3000. This is based on Van Buren design documents and is not canon. Van Buren was the cancelled Fallout 3 by Black Isle Studios, and the Lil Pip 3000 was going to be the main Pip-Boy variant there, and it was technically the first Pip-Boy meant to be visibly worn on the player. Already, that's a big deal, because it's a design philosophy shift. Instead of the Pip-Boy being purely a UI abstraction, it becomes a physical object that is part of the character's silhouette, like a real wearable people notice and recognize. Now, the really fun part is what it implies about tech evolution inside Fallout. The Lil Pip is described as a much less cumbersome device worn on the forearm, offering all the functionality of its bigger variant. It used integrated circuits instead of vacuum tubes, had a flip-up split-screen monitor, and let you pick between 3 display colors: green, blue, and red. It could accept up to 6 data tubes as expansion hardware to expand functionality. It could read holodisks using a loading tray, and it wasn't a sales success, largely because it was fragile compared to the rugged 2000 series. That's a whole alternate tech history in one paragraph. Integrated circuits implies miniaturization. Flip-up split screen implies a more modern interface mindset. Expansion tubes implies modular computing. But fragility implies the trade-off. You make it smaller and sleeker, you lose the "this will survive the apocalypse" ruggedness that makes other Pip-Boys legendary. In other words, the Lil Pip 3000 feels like Robco trying to go from industrial vault hardware to consumer wearable, and then finding out that consumer wearables break when you drop them, which is a lesson humanity apparently needs to learn every 10 years. Here's a quick joke before we keep going. The Lil Pip 3000 is basically the Fallout universe inventing the first smartwatch, then immediately discovering the first smartwatch problem, which is that if you sneeze on it wrong, it shatters and costs a month's salary to replace. And the Lil Pip's interface is also telling. When open, it showed date and time with a displayed time zone, listed expansion hardware present, and allowed access to 4 main functions: alarm, tasks, maps, and downloads. That menu set is way more daily life organizer than combat survival interface. Compare that to stat, INV, data, map, radio. The Lil Pip is not obsessed with inventory the same way, at least in the way it presents itself. It's framed like a personal assistant. That's huge for tone. It suggests a Fallout world where Pip-Boys weren't just issued to vault residents as control devices, but were potentially trending toward being normal tech products people might buy, upgrade, and customize. Now, because it's non-canon, you don't treat this like hard lore for the modern games, but you absolutely treat it like a window into what the franchise creators imagined about the Pip-Boys' design future, especially because it was later included in a tabletop RPG description by Joshua Sawyer, reinforcing that it was a real concept with thought behind it. Hold on to your hats, because we're about to go even weirder. You might think the non-canon Pip-Boy stuff ends at smaller wrist device, but then you hit the PIP pad, and suddenly the Pip-Boy concept stops being a wrist gadget at all. It becomes a tablet, and if you've ever wondered what Fallout would look like if Robco leaned into a full product ecosystem, the PIP pad is basically that hint.pip pad. So, much like the previous one, this is also based on stuff that never came out, specifically Project V13 promotional material, and is not canon. But the description is clear and consistent. The Robco PIP pad is an experimental tablet-sized electronic device manufactured by Robco as an offshoot of the Pip-Boy series, mainly for reading text and running high-resolution graphics. A cache of these devices was discovered after the Great War in an old Robco warehouse. There are known bugs with the text processor, and users may occasionally see strange characters. I love this because it's the most believable piece of lost pre-war tech writing ever. Of course, there was a warehouse full of tablets. And of course, they were experimental. Oh, and how could we forget, of course, the tech software was buggy. Fallout is retrofuturism, but it's also a world where corporate tech was always a little janky, always oversold, always shipped with issues, and then the apocalypse happened and nobody was around to patch version 1.0. The PIP pad also ties into Fallout's meta history, because the page says the Armageddon Rag magazine started issuing electronic versions readable by PIP pads with its 3rd issue, and that the PIP pad is the interface of the Armageddon Rag Project Vi-13 newsletter. That's a real piece of franchise promotional weirdness, but it also reinforces the idea that the PIP, the personal information processor, as a category could have been a whole line of devices, not just a Pip-Boy. The Pip-Boy models map directly onto Fallout's big question about pre-war America, not simply simply the question of, did they have cool technology? We already know that they did. The question is, what was the technology for? The Pip-Boy can act as a vault key and interface with other systems like Power Armor, which tells you the device is infrastructure, not a toy. The future models, the Mark IV, 5, and 6, get even more explicit about infrastructure by emphasizing distributed alerts, vault utility access, object tracking updates every second, and a microphone that can be exploited, which is basically the nightmare combo of convenience and surveillance. The Lil Pip and PIP pad show you the consumer future Robco might have chased, where PIP devices become normal tech, and that's arguably the darkest timeline because it means vault tech style control becomes socially normalized long before anyone steps into a vault. Each one is basically a time capsule, not just for the tech, for the mindset, because each model quietly reveals what vault tech thought you were going to be doing when you walked out of that vault door: surviving, rebuilding, being monitored, or my favorite option, being turned into a human spreadsheet with legs. And the reason all of this is so fun is because every model answers the same question in a different way. When you strap a Pip-Boy on, are you putting on a survival tool, or are you putting on a corporate interface that turns your life into data? In Fallout, the honest answer is usually both, and that's exactly why it's one of the smartest and creepiest objects the franchise ever invented. This has been Every Fallout Pip Boy Explained. If you want to see every known settlement's fate in Fallout explained, click the video on the screen.